First Contact Protocol. Commander Sarah Chen stood before the airlock of the Zrylaxian research vessel Astralis, her heart thundering against her ribs. 20 years of scientific advancement, diplomatic negotiations, and cultural exchange had led to this moment. The first human liaison officer to serve aboard an alien vessel. Her fingers traced the neural interface patch behind her left ear. Experimental technology that might help her bridge the vast communication gap between their species. The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss, revealing a corridor that seemed to pulse with living light. Bioluminescent patterns flowed through the translucent walls like blood through veins, creating an ever-shifting canvas of blues and greens. But it wasn't just aesthetic. This was communication happening right before her eyes. The Zrylaxians were talking about her arrival. First Officer Christ waited at the threshold, their crystalline exoskeleton refracting the ambient light into prismatic patterns. Unlike the crude sketches in Sarah's briefing materials, the reality of a Zrylaxian was breathtaking. Their body resembled a living geode, with transparent sections revealing complex networks of bioelectric nodes pulsing beneath the surface. Where humans had vocal cords, they had electromagnetic organs capable of generating complex fields that carried meaning through pure energy. "Welcome aboard the Astralis," Christ transmitted directly into Sarah's neural interface. The translation came through as words, but she could feel the underlying resonance, a symphony of bioelectric frequencies that carried layers of meaning no human language could fully capture. "Your presence here marks a significant evolution in our understanding of each other." Sarah activated her interface's response protocol, converting her thoughts into electromagnetic patterns. "The honor is mine," she projected, watching Christ's nodes flutter in response. Her transmission was crude by their standards, like a child first learning to speak. But it was a start. "Your attempt at our communication method is intriguing," Christ responded, their inner lights shifting to a curious amber. "Most species we encounter never progress beyond mechanical translators. Yet here you are, adapting your very nervous system to bridge the gap between us." As they moved through the ship's corridors, Sarah became acutely aware of the conversations happening all around her. The neural interface translated what it could, but there was so much more. Emotional undertones, cultural references, scientific data, all flowing through the ship's living networks. The Zrylaxians didn't just communicate. They existed in a constant state of shared consciousness. "Your quarters have been modified to accommodate your biological needs," Christ transmitted, leading her into a chamber where the bioluminescent patterns were muted to a soft glow. "Though I must admit, we find your species' need for periodic unconsciousness fascinating. The concept of sleep is foreign to us." Sarah smiled, knowing the gesture would be lost on Christ, but unable to help herself. "Just as I find it fascinating that your species experiences time as a continuous stream of shared consciousness. There's so much we can learn from each other." Indeed, Christ's crystalline form shifted, creating new facets that caught the light. "Which is why your next task may prove challenging. The ship's council awaits your presence. They wish to understand how humans process abstract concepts through your primitive verbal methods." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. This was the real test, not just communicating basic ideas, but conveying the depth and complexity of human thought to beings who experienced reality in fundamentally different ways. The neural interface hummed against her skull, ready to translate her consciousness into their medium of choice. "I'm ready," she transmitted, watching as her electromagnetic signature rippled through the ship's living networks. The patterns around her shifted, creating a path of flowing light that would lead to the council chamber. Each step would take her further from everything familiar, deeper into a world where thought itself took on physical form. Christ's nodes pulsed with what the interface translated as approval. "Then let us proceed, Commander Chen. Show us how humanity thinks." The council chamber opened before them like the interior of a giant opalized shell, its walls alive with cascading patterns of light and energy. 7 Zrylaxian elders waited within, their crystalline forms more elaborate, and multifaceted than Christ's. As Sarah entered, she felt their collective consciousness brush against her mind through the interface, curious, analytical, and completely alien. This was what she had trained for. This was how humanity would prove itself ready for true galactic citizenship, not through force of arms or technological might, but through the willingness to fundamentally change how they perceived and shared reality itself. Sarah took a deep breath and opened her mind to this Rylaxian collective consciousness. The interface hummed to life, and she began to show them what it meant to be human. One thought, one story, one shared experience at a time. The journey of understanding had begun, and its ripples would reshape both their civilizations in ways neither species could yet imagine. The Silent Symphony. 3 weeks into her assignment aboard the Astralis, Commander Sarah Chen had learned to interpret the subtle variations in the ship's bioluminescent communications. The neural interface helped, but there was an artistry to Rylaxian thought-sharing that no technology could fully capture. It was during her morning data review that she first noticed something unusual in the ship's long-range sensor feeds. Christ, she transmitted, her electromagnetic signature now stronger and more refined than in her first days aboard. Are you seeing this anomaly in Sector 7? The crystalline first officer materialized beside her workstation, their internal nodes shifting from a steady azure to a puzzled violet. The sensor data showed a region of space that seemed to absorb all electromagnetic emissions, a void that shouldn't exist. Fascinating. Christ's response rippled through the ship's neural network. Our standard protocols for analyzing spatial phenomena are yielding no useful data. The void appears to operate outside our established scientific framework. Sarah studied the readings, her human brain processing the information in a fundamentally different way from her Rylaxian colleagues. Where they saw disrupted energy patterns, she saw something familiar, a pattern that tickled at the edges of her memory. It reminds me of something from Earth's oceans, she transmitted, watching as her thoughts created ripples of light across the chamber's walls. Specifically, how certain marine creatures create dead zones in electrical fields to hide from predators. The ship's council chamber erupted in a cascade of colors as the Rylaxian scientists debated this new perspective. Their species had evolved in crystal caves, developing their electromagnetic communication in response to their mineral-rich environment. The concept of liquid water environments and their unique properties was alien to them. Explain further, the chief scientist, Valorx, requested. Their elaborate crystalline forms sparkled with intellectual curiosity. How does this biological adaptation from your world relate to a spatial anomaly? Sarah interfaced with the ship's visualization system, projecting images of electric eels and torpedo rays. These creatures can manipulate electrical fields not just for communication or hunting, but for concealment. What if we're not looking at a natural void, but at something hiding? The chamber's bioluminescent patterns shifted to a deep indigo, the Rylaxian equivalent of intense concentration. Sarah had learned that their species processed new information by literally sharing it through their collective consciousness, each individual adding their own perspective to create a more complete understanding. A novel approach, Christ transmitted, but our sensors are calibrated to detect all known forms of energy manipulation. What could possibly hide from such comprehensive scanning? Sarah smiled, a gesture she still made despite knowing her alien colleagues couldn't interpret its meaning. That's just it. You're looking for known forms of energy manipulation. But what if this entity operates on principles we haven't encountered before? She accessed her neural interfaces database, pulling up historical data from humanity's early days of space exploration. When humans first developed radio astronomy, we thought we were hearing the complete symphony of the cosmos. Then we discovered infrared, ultraviolet, X-rays, gamma rays, entire spectrums of information we hadn't known existed. The chamber's patterns swirled with new colors as the Rylaxians processed this perspective. Their own technological development had followed a different path, focused on ever more sophisticated ways of manipulating and reading electromagnetic fields. You suggest, Valorx transmitted slowly, their nodes pulsing with deliberate rhythm, that our very sophistication might blind us to simpler truths. Not simpler, Sarah corrected, her thoughts creating precise patterns in the electromagnetic field. Different. Human history is full of moments where looking at a problem from a completely new angle led to breakthrough discoveries. Christ moved closer to the sensor display, their crystalline form refracting the data streams into new patterns. How would you propose we investigate this anomaly, Commander Chen? Sarah's fingers flew over her interface controls, modifying the sensor protocols. Instead of trying to penetrate the void with active scans, let's try passive observation. Watch how it interacts with the natural background radiation of space. Look for patterns in what's missing, not just what's there. The chamber hummed with electromagnetic activity as the Zrylaxians integrated this approach into their collective analysis. Gradually, the sensor displays began to show new information. Subtle disturbances in the cosmic background radiation, tiny irregularities in the void's boundaries that suggested purpose rather than random phenomenon. There, Sarah transmitted, highlighting a recurring pattern in the data. That's not natural behavior, that's deliberate camouflage. The revelation sent waves of excitement through the ship's neural network. For the first time in their long history of space exploration, the Zrylaxians were about to encounter something that challenged their fundamental understanding of reality, and it had taken a human's unique perspective to help them see it. Commander Chen, Christ transmitted, their nodes glowing with what Sarah had learned to recognize as respect. It seems we have much to learn from your species' way of perceiving the universe. Shall we investigate further? Sarah felt the thrill of discovery coursing through her veins, creating ripples in her electromagnetic output that made the nearby walls pulse with shared excitement. Absolutely. But first, we need to figure out how to say hello to something that doesn't want to be seen. Resonance. The void wasn't empty. As the astrales drew closer to the anomaly, Commander Sarah Chen watched in horror as tendrils of dark energy reached out toward the ship, drawn to the Zrylaxians' bioelectric fields like moths to flame. The ship's living walls pulsed with warning patterns, their usual smooth flow of communication fragmenting into chaotic bursts. Multiple crew members are reporting energy drainage. Christ transmitted, their crystalline form flickering as they fought to maintain their bioelectric integrity. Their consciousness patterns are becoming unstable. Sarah's neural interface crackled with distress signals from throughout the ship. The entity within the void wasn't just hiding, it was hungry. And the Zrylaxians' sophisticated electromagnetic communication system made them a perfect feast. Full reverse. She projected through the ship's network, but the creature had already latched onto the Astralis's hull. The living metal of the ship groaned as dark tendrils spread across its surface, seeking entry points. Through her interface, Sarah could feel the crew's mounting panic, an alien sensation of fractured thoughts and dimming consciousness. We cannot maintain collective coherence, Valorx transmitted weekly from the science station. Our neural network is being consumed. The chief scientist's crystalline form had lost its luster, internal nodes flickering like dying stars. Sarah's mind raced. The entity was targeting the Zrylaxians' bioelectric fields, but her human nervous system remained unaffected. Her neural interface buzzed with interference, but her own thoughts remained clear. There was something about human biology, something fundamentally different, that the creature couldn't process. Christ. She called out both verbally and electromagnetically, fighting to be heard through the growing interference. I need access to the ship's field generators. All of them. The first officer struggled to focus their dimming consciousness. Granted, but our defensive fields are useless against this entity. It simply absorbs them. I'm not going to fight it. Sarah transmitted, her fingers flying over the control interface. I'm going to confuse it. Human brains operate on a completely different frequency than your consciousness network. If I can replicate that pattern through the ship's generators. She didn't wait for approval. The situation was deteriorating too quickly. Sarah connected her neural interface directly to the ship's field generation system, using herself as a template. Her consciousness expanded through the Astralis's networks, her human brainwave patterns cascading through systems designed for alien thoughts. The effect was immediate, where the Zrylaxian's electromagnetic communication was elegant and harmonious. Human neural patterns were chaotic, emotional, and unpredictable. The entity's tendrils recoiled from the hull as if burned, its carefully constructed void rippling with disturbance. "Everyone, link your consciousness through my interface," Sarah broadcast, creating a protected channel within the chaos of her human brainwave patterns. "It can't process our neural architecture. We can use that." One by one, the weakened Zrylaxians connected to her signal. Their usual collective consciousness fragmented and reformed through the lens of human thought patterns, messy, individual, but gloriously alive. The ship's walls began to pulse with new colors, a hybrid of alien harmony and human chaos. "Fascinating," Christ transmitted through the protected channel, their nodes beginning to regain their glow. "Your species' neural inefficiency is actually an advantage. The entity cannot predict or capture such erratic patterns." Sarah managed a grim smile as she maintained the defensive field. "Sometimes being messy has its benefits, but we're not done yet. That thing is still out there, and now it's angry." The void had begun to change shape, attempting to adapt to this new threat. Dark tendrils probed the ship's defenses, searching for weaknesses in the human pattern shield. Through her interface, Sarah could sense its frustration and its hunger. "We need to do more than just defend," she transmitted to the recovering crew. "This thing feeds on consciousness itself, but maybe, just maybe, we can give it indigestion." Valorx's nodes pulsed with renewed energy. "You suggest we weaponize the very chaos that protects us?" "Exactly." Sarah began reconfiguring the field generators. "Every human brain is unique. Our thoughts don't follow the kind of logical patterns your species uses. If we can amplify that randomness, broadcast it directly into the void." Understanding rippled through the crew. One by one, they began feeding their own consciousness through Sarah's human pattern filter, adding their unique variations to the chaotic symphony. The ship's walls blazed with impossible colors as ordered alien thought collided with human unpredictability. The void writhed. The entity within it tried to retreat, but Sarah pressed the advantage. She pushed more power to the field generators, broadcasting the full spectrum of human consciousness. Dreams, emotions, memories, hopes, fears, all the glorious messiness of the human mind, amplified through alien technology. With a silent scream that rattled every neural interface on the ship, the entity fled. The void collapsed in on itself, leaving behind nothing but normal space and a lot of questions. In the aftermath, as the Zrylaxians slowly rebuilt their normal communication patterns, Christ approached Sarah's station. Their crystalline form had fully regained its luster, nodes pulsing with thoughtful light. "You saved our lives," they transmitted, "by embracing what we once considered your species' greatest weakness. Perhaps it is time we reconsidered our definition of efficiency." Sarah leaned back in her chair, exhausted but satisfied. "Efficiency has its place," she responded, both through her interface and aloud. "But sometimes you need a little chaos to shake things up." The ship's walls rippled with agreement, human and alien patterns merging in a new kind of harmony. The bridge between. In the weeks following the void entity encounter, the Astralis had become a laboratory of innovation. The ship's primary research bay hummed with activity, its walls dancing with experimental communication patterns as Commander Sarah Chen and Christ worked to revolutionize interspecies communication. "The neural patterns we use to defend against the entity," Sarah explained to the assembled science team, her thoughts creating ripples of light across the chamber surfaces, proved that human and Zrylaxian consciousness can interact in ways we never imagined. But what if we could make it more than just a defensive measure? Christ's crystalline form shifted, refracting the ambient light into complex patterns. Our encounter demonstrated that the supposed chaos of human thought contains its own kind of order. The challenge lies in creating a stable interface between our different forms of consciousness. The research bay had been modified with new sensor arrays and field generators, allowing them to visualize the interaction between human brainwaves and Zrylaxian bioelectric fields. Sarah's neural interface now incorporated elements of Zrylaxian crystal technology, while Christ had adapted their consciousness nodes to process human-style neural impulses. "Watch this," Sarah transmitted, activating the hybrid system they'd been developing. Instead of converting her thoughts into simple electromagnetic patterns, the new interface created something entirely new, a fusion of human neural architecture and Zrylaxian field mechanics. The result manifested as a three-dimensional light sculpture in the center of the room. Complex patterns shifted and flowed, carrying meaning through both structure and energy. It wasn't just communication. It was a new form of shared consciousness that preserved the unique characteristics of both species. "Remarkable," Valderks observed, their nodes pulsing with scientific excitement. "The pattern maintains coherence while incorporating both linear and nonlinear thought processes. How does it handle emotional content?" Sarah smiled, letting her feelings flow through the interface. The light sculpture bloomed with new colors and textures, expressing joy and pride in ways that transcended both human and Zrylaxian traditional communication. "That's the beauty of it," Chris transmitted, their own consciousness merging with the display. "Rather than trying to translate between our species, we're creating a new language altogether, one that draws on the strengths of both." The breakthrough had come from their analysis of the void entity encounter. Human consciousness, with its seemingly chaotic blend of logic and emotion, created patterns that were simultaneously more complex and more flexible than pure Zrylaxian thought. By incorporating these characteristics into their bioelectric communication, the Zrylaxians could express concepts that had previously been impossible in their rigid, efficient system. "But it goes both ways," Sarah added, manipulating the hybrid interface. "Human language is limited by our reliance on sequential communication, words that must come one after another. This system allows us to share entire concepts simultaneously, like you do, while maintaining our unique perspective." The science team watched in fascination as Sarah demonstrated, sharing a complex human memory through the new interface. It wasn't just the visual and auditory components of the memory that transferred. The emotional context, the associated thoughts, the very human way of processing the experience all came through intact. "The implications for diplomacy are enormous," Christ transmitted, their nodes shifting to a thoughtful blue. "True understanding between species has always been limited by the barriers of translation. This system could change everything." Sarah nodded, both physically and through the interface. "It's not just about diplomacy. Think about scientific cooperation, cultural exchange, education, any field where deep understanding across species lines is crucial." The research bay's walls pulsed with excitement as the team began to explore the possibilities. They had already discovered that the hybrid system could handle input from multiple users simultaneously, creating a shared space where human and Zrylaxian consciousness could interact freely. "There is one concern," Valderks transmitted, their crystalline form refracting Sirius patterns. "The void entity was drawn to our consciousness signatures. Won't this hybrid system create an even more attractive target?" "Actually, no," Sarah responded, pulling up the defensive protocols they'd integrated into the system. "We've incorporated the same chaotic patterns that repelled the entity. The hybrid interface is inherently resistant to consciousness-based attacks because it never maintains a single, predictable pattern." Christ moved to the central display, their nodes pulsing with pride. Commander Chen's insight proved crucial here as well. "By embracing the unpredictability of human thought patterns, we've created something more secure than either of our original communication methods." The implications weren't lost on anyone in the room. What had started as a defense mechanism had evolved into something that could reshape the future of interspecies relations. The Astrales, once just a research vessel, had become the birthplace of a new era in galactic communication. "We should begin preparing for wider implementation," Christ suggested, their thoughts creating intricate patterns in the hybrid display. "The diplomatic corps will want to see this in action." Sarah's excitement rippled through the interface, creating cascades of light that reflected her optimism. Agreed. But first, we need to ensure the system is accessible to all potential users. Not everyone will adapt as quickly as we did. The research bay hummed with renewed purpose as the team began refining their creation. In combining the best aspects of human and Srilaxian communication, they had built more than just a bridge between species. They had opened a door to possibilities neither civilization had imagined possible. Evolution's echo. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Diplomatic Corps stretched before Commander Sarah Chen like a vast crystal cathedral. Representatives from 17 spacefaring civilizations filled the chamber, their diverse forms illuminated by the soft glow of countless communication interfaces. The Astralis hung in orbit above, its hull still bearing traces of their encounter with the void entity, battle scars that had led to an unprecedented breakthrough. "Are you prepared?" Christ asked, their crystalline form resonating with what Sarah now recognized as nervous anticipation. The first officer's nodes pulsed with subtle colors that the standard diplomatic translators couldn't begin to interpret, but Sarah understood perfectly through their hybrid interface. "As ready as I'll ever be," she responded, her thoughts creating patterns that merged seamlessly with Christ's bioelectric field. "Though I never imagined my first diplomatic summit would involve rewiring how species talk to each other." The chamber's central platform activated as they approached, generating a neutral field designed to accommodate various forms of communication. Traditional holographic displays flickered to life, ready to translate proceedings into dozens of different languages and signal patterns. But today, they would demonstrate something entirely new. High Admiral Ven, the human representative, stepped forward first. "Distinguished delegates," she began, her words automatically converted into various alien communication formats. "We are gathered here to witness a demonstration that promises to revolutionize interspecies communication. Commander Chen, you have the floor." Sarah took her position at the center of the platform, Christ beside her. Their hybrid interface hummed to life, creating a subtle field that encompassed the entire chamber. The delegates stirred with interest, some leaning forward in their seats, others extending sensory organs for better perception. "What you are about to experience," Sarah transmitted, both verbally and through the new system, "is not a translation. It's not an interpretation. It's a genuine sharing of consciousness across species barriers." She nodded to Christ, and they activated the full hybrid interface. The chamber transformed as their combined consciousness filled the space. The walls came alive with flowing patterns of light and energy, but this was merely the surface manifestation. Each delegate suddenly found themselves experiencing thoughts and sensations that transcended their species' normal modes of perception. Through the interface, Sarah shared the memory of her first step aboard the Astralis, not just the visual scene, but the complex mix of human emotions that accompanied it. Fear, excitement, determination, wonder, feelings that many alien species had no direct equivalent for became perfectly clear through the hybrid system. Christ then shared their perspective of the same moment, their Srilaxian consciousness expanding to encompass the assembly. The delegates experienced their initial fascination with human neural patterns, their gradual understanding of emotional communication, and the profound realization that efficiency wasn't always the highest virtue. The chamber erupted in a cascade of responses, light patterns, chemical signals, gravitational pulses, and dozens of other communication methods, all trying to process this new experience. Sarah and Christ carefully modulated the interface, allowing each species to adapt at their own pace. "This system," Sarah continued, her thoughts creating harmonious patterns in the hybrid field, "was born from crisis. When we encountered a consciousness-consuming entity in deep space, our very differences became our salvation. Human neural chaos combined with Srilaxian field mechanics created something entirely new, a way of sharing understanding that preserves the unique perspectives of all involved." A Meridian ambassador, their gaseous form swirling with interest, transmitted a question. How can such a system be implemented across different biological and technological frameworks? Christ's nodes pulsed with anticipation. They had been waiting for this question. The beauty of the system lies in its adaptability. Watch. They activated a secondary protocol, and the hybrid interface began to reshape itself, accommodating the Meridian's gas-based consciousness patterns. The demonstration continued for hours as each species tested the system's capabilities. The hybrid interface proved remarkably versatile, able to handle everything from the quantum state communications of crystalline beings to the dream sharing of aquatic civilizations. But it was more than just a technical triumph. As the delegates experienced each other's consciousness directly, ancient misconceptions began to fade. Species that had long viewed each other with suspicion found common ground in shared experiences. Cultural barriers that had persisted for generations dissolved in the face of true understanding.